Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. Now, I've done a lot of Warband mod videos, a lot, but so far, all of my attempts to clear the spreadsheet of all the Warband mods you've been recommending have failed. Mostly because every time I drop a new Warband mod video, you people just keep bringing up more mods for me to try. Every damn time! So, you wanted more Warband content? Here it is. Before we start though, a word from the sponsor of this video. This video is brought to you by me. That's right, I do a lot of Warband mod videos and a bunch of other things, so you know, if you like the content, you should subscribe. Anyway, here we go. Warband mods that you recommended, again. Starting very light at number 15 with the Eagle and the Radiant Cross. This mod takes us to the original map for Calradia from the first Mount and Blade game, but in the late medieval to Renaissance period. Based on the time period, it's got about everything you would expect, from the armors to the weapons, so you can enjoy the firing line or do some pike and shot, whatever you like. However, given that it's number 15, I don't have much else to say about this mod. What this mod is basically is native Warband, but with more recent weapons and a few sub-mods like diplomacy. But personally, I'm also having a bug where towns don't spawn at all, but that could just be me, or the game version, or anything else really. I actually wanted to try a siege to see what happens, and well, it went about as absurdly as you can expect. To be fair, I wish mods had a feature to make this possible, if only to make battles and sieges less grindy when we're not in the mood. So yeah, I'm sure it was a pretty cool mod when it was released, but now it's just incomplete. If you want a better version of this, I'd recommend either Calradia 1417 or Nova Aedas. Next up, at number 14, this is Independence of Chile. This mod takes us to South America in the 1800s. As the title suggests, it mostly revolves around the Chilean War of Independence, which, I'll admit, I don't know much about, so it's not an historical event that I'm particularly invested in. Being the 1800s, the mod revolves mostly around the musket and the firing line, and overall, did a pretty good job. But other than that, once again, there's really not that much to say. Like other gun mods, it suffers from the same limitations. Because muskets are deadly but inaccurate, battles can drag on for a while at range, and in sieges, they can be unbalanced. But overall, I'd say the mod achieved what it aimed to do with the setting, I just wish it did more. It's basically native with guns set in South America. You'll definitely appreciate it if you're passionate about the history and culture, but otherwise, as far as gun mods go, it's not bad, but there's better options out there. Similarly at number 13, here's Winds of the War. This mod takes us to Europe in the late medieval and Renaissance period. Given that there aren't that many mods for this time period, let alone in the entirety of Europe, it's nice to get a mod like that. However, Wind of the War is far from finished. As you can see on the map, some settlements don't even have proper names yet, and most of the lords retain the native names, rather than historical ones. Although to be fair, King Harlos would definitely make a pretty good French king. The mod does cover items from the time period pretty well, so the Gothic armors and such are pretty awesome, and they surprisingly offer a lot of protection. So in the mod, I basically got myself a French army and I attacked the English. And I noticed the battle started to drag on for a long time, with people beating the crap out of each other but nobody actually dying. I mean, look at this. I had to shoot this enemy at point blank multiple times, and he still wouldn't go down. So perhaps the armors are a little too overpowered? Overall, Winds of the War looks pretty good, and it does bring a bunch of sub-mods like pre-battle planning, diplomacy, and freelancer. But it also made armors so overpowered that fighting anything less than bandits becomes a real slug. So it's not a bad mod per se, it just needs a lot of polishing. And considering only one version was released in 2012, I don't think we'll get more than that. As far as Renaissance mods go, it was a good effort, but there's just better options. This mod did take us to a niche, interesting historical setting. At number 12, this is Golden Earth. It's rare for mods to feature North America, but North America when the Vikings first landed? That's pretty cool. As you can see, Native American tribes make up most of the map, with the Vikings having a few settlements off the coast. So essentially you can pick any side to fight the others, making it one of the few, if not the only mod I know of, where you can actively play as Native Americans. Not that I did, I wanted to check out the Vikings first, and I just ended up sticking with them. That said, Viking settlements are so few, I quickly found myself hiring native warriors to make up the numbers, and they look pretty awesome. And after joining the Vikings as a mercenary, I got in several battles, including an epic siege defense against endless waves of the Warband. Overall, it's a pretty good mod for people interested in this time period, which doesn't really get enough attention, I think. However, while the map is huge, there isn't much to do. It still feels a lot like playing native. Or playing Viking Conquest, I should say. They added some of the soundtrack, which is pretty neat. The mod is also fairly recent, with the last update just last year, so it's possible we'll see more features in the future. As it stands, it's not the best, but it's pretty straightforward, it works, and I love the setting. Moving on to number 11, we have 12th Century. This mod is mostly set in Asia during the Middle Ages. Although the mod mainly centers around China, it also covers Mongolia to the north, India to the south, and stretches all the way to the Middle East and bits of Hungary. The mod basically covers the entire landmass that Genghis Khan conquered, and one of the key sells of this mod is that you can basically create your own Mongolian horde, in theory. But let's take a step back. 12th Century is the only mod primarily set in China that I've played besides 180 Heroes. So is it any good? Well, yeah, overall the scenery is much better. I haven't seen anything from the native map. The items are also pretty cool, but the mod itself isn't real balanced or polished. For instance, bandits. They're the primary source of leveling up and loot in the early game, but in this mod they are very sparse and are often such big groups that they don't even count as early game targets. Markets are also very limited, with many stores not selling boots or gloves, and shields are practically non-existent in the mod. As for getting Mongolian troops, you actually have to be a Mongolian lord to recruit them, otherwise you get a different, weaker troop type, which does feel limiting. So overall, this mod is visually immersive, but I'd say it suffers from a lack of priorities. A good example of that is the Middle East and Hungary portion. I get that they wanted to cover the entire landmass that was reached by the Mongols, but if you have a mod set in China, no one is gonna bother playing in the Middle East. There are so many mods focused on the Middle East and the Crusades, that I feel 12th Century should not have bothered with that region at all, and should have instead focused on polishing Asia even more. That's not to say the mod is bad, it's just not as good as it could be. If you're into medieval China, this should hit the mark, otherwise, it's still a diamond in the rough. This next mod though, I really liked, if only it was more stable. At number 10, this is the New World 1521. Upon playing this mod, I wanted to recommend it so bad. New World 1521 takes us to South America, just as the Spanish are landing. Much like Golden Earth, the mod centers around the native population as it comes into contact with Europe. And I gotta say, the Mayans and Aztecs and all these other civilizations look gorgeous in the mod. The flamboyant armors and obsidian weapons simply look amazing. It really feels like on the level of something like Gekokujo. Along with the music, the scenery, and the battlefields, the immersion of the mod is truly unique. Unfortunately, the mod is highly unstable and prone to crashes. The modder is well aware of this, but whether he's still working on a second version, as said on the mod page, is anyone's guess. As it stands, I would love to have my own army of Jaguar warriors and just clash with some conquistadors, but the moment the battles gets too big, it's almost guaranteed to crash. Seriously, this mod has a lot of potential to be amazing. If only it was stable, I would have put it among the top mods in this video, purely based on immersion alone. But moving on, back to modern day this time, we have at number 9, Snow in the East. Snow in the East is a World War II mod centering around the Eastern Front between Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia. The mod offers you to start as a mercenary with a warband of your own for a few select factions, and I ended up going with Finland to kick some Soviet butts. In terms of historical gun mods, this is the most modern I've ever played. In terms of immersion, the mod is as solid as I'd hoped for it to be. We got new scenery, new items, new music, we have it all. However, the more modern the weaponry gets, the more obvious the limitations of the game become. It's very difficult for mods like these to be balanced. Since we're past muskets, guns are more accurate and much faster to reload, which leads battles to either end very quickly up close, or drag on for a bit at long range. It also makes sieges basically suicidal unless you have a lot of troops to send into the meat grinder. The main fix for this would be what the Reckoning mod did. This mod had modern firearms, but implemented a mechanic that made NPCs seek cover. Pretty ambitious, I should say, and it would have to be the next addition to Snow in the East to make it work better. But besides that, the mod feels fairly complete. You can join either superpowers, or join smaller factions like the Polish Resistance, and it's basically a well-done World War II mod all around. And if you're looking for some gun mod that isn't incomplete like Red Wars, or as hardcore as Between Empires, Snow in the East should be the perfect balance in between. And number 8, this is Medieval Conquests. Medieval Conquest is based on 1257 AD, arguably one of the most ambitious mods ever made for Warband, which takes place in Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa in the Middle Ages. So right off the bat, Medieval Conquest is just as massive and should be an instant winner for anyone who loved 1257 AD. Not that Medieval Conquest is all that different, it mostly just adds more features on top of 1257 AD. One of the main differences centers around kingdom stability. You can choose to start the game as a monarch, but you're not the monarch, you're a usurper. And a big part of the mod in this context is to stay in control of your kingdom, at least according to the instructions at the beginning. This mod also takes a feature similar to one found in a New Dawn mod, that of smaller factions forming through rebellions and civil war, which does make the map potentially a lot more chaotic. It's also a lot more hardcore overall in terms of combat. I'd say more about it, but there's not that much more to say. If you loved 1257 AD, or overall love medieval Europe, and you want even more complexity, Medieval Conquest may just offer that extra layer you're looking for, but it's entirely subjective. If you want something a little more niche though, and a lot more hardcore, then number 7 is for you. This is Rust's 13th Century Way of the Warrior. I have a bit more to say about this one. Unlike 1257 AD, this mod focuses entirely on Eastern Europe in 1237, just as the Mongolian horde is about to show up. Rust's 13th Century immediately distinguished itself by being ridiculously difficult. So where to even begin? Starting out as an adventurer is basically impossible. For starters, good luck getting XP through fighting because looters give out 1 XP per kill, so leveling up through fighting would take forever. Want to get some decent loot? Well, in 13th Century, looting requires extra time, during which you're completely exposed to attack from other groups. And imagine hitting enemies without them even flinching. The moment you encounter enemies with armor, landing a strike may not even stop them from landing their attacks, which makes fighting significantly harder. The mod also added the bleeding out feature, as seen in Walda, but it's way worse. A good hit could cause you to bleed out in mere seconds. Also, tournaments use the gear you have, meaning fighting lords in the game is virtually unwinnable. And recruiting from villages now require at least 5 relations with said village, so getting a warband up and running is also phenomenally difficult. So yeah, Rust 13th Century is probably one of the most hardcore, difficult mods I've ever played. There is a section that explains all in the game concepts, and it's definitely designed to be a punishing experience. Now, you can actually start as a vassal or king, which will give you good gear, money, and men from the start, so you can avoid the worst of it, but even then, it's bound to be just as brutal, only on a bigger scale when you go to war. Overall, the mod is actually pretty solid and immersive. If you don't mind the difficulty or actually enjoy it, then Rust 13th Century is definitely a good mod for this place and time. Another mod that represents its time period well stands at number 6 and is called Rome at War. At this point, I've played many Roman mods, and they do have a tendency to all look similar after a while because they're all about the Roman Empire. However, this mod was a pleasant surprise and does distinguish itself in a few areas. For starters, it's the only mod I've played in which Rome isn't at the peak of its power, but in its beginning. As such, the mod centers only around Italy and Greece, but there's still plenty of factions to go to war with, and the iconic legionaries just aren't a thing yet historically, so the Roman army is a bit more primitive. That said, the scenery, the items, and music all check the marks. Formation mechanics are present, and valleys of javelins are as satisfying as they get. What I did like the most though about this mod is that it not only lets you start at different stages like Lord or King, but it gives even more options. So you want to be a Lord? You can, but you can also choose your starting renown and also your starting wealth, which really makes it easy to just jump into the game and go straight to war. Overall, Rome at War is just one of many Roman mods, and although it's not technically complete, it still feels surprisingly solid. If you wanted to conquer the entire Italian peninsula, or unite all of the Greek city-states, this mod will definitely do the trick. But here we go, we're getting in the top 5 now, so here's Deeds of Arms and Chivalry. This mod takes us to the 100 Years' War between France and England in the late medieval period. If this sounds familiar, it's because I also reviewed a mod called 1429 The 100 Years' Wars a few months ago, and on the surface, these two mods are almost identical. They are both set in France at the same time, so the map, the scenery, and items are all pretty similar as well. 1429 has been taken down by its author though, so Deeds of Arms and Chivalry is more accessible, and which mod you prefer can depend on the slightest thing. When I played Deeds of Arms and Chivalry, I did notice a couple of things I really liked. Besides being equally immersive, it's also much more hardcore. The mod brings back the battle formations from Walda, as well as the sheer brutality of the combat. Battles in this mod are just deadly, it's ridiculous. They also amped up the range of archers and crossbowmen. They'll fire at each other with surprisingly good accuracy from across the map. And it does make sense when you think of the famous English longbows. But as with other mods, I also like that this mod allows you to start as a historical ruler of any faction, so for anyone less interested in the leveling up and warband building aspect of the game, and more interested in just fighting the 100 Years' War, this basically allows you to do just that right away. So overall, Deeds of Arms and Chivalry is a pretty solid mod. You can still play 1429 using my Google Drive link, but you can really pick either mod and still have a great time. At number 4, Honor and Glory. Honor and Glory is set in Eastern Europe in the late medieval period, and covers mostly Russia, Poland, Ukraine, and Sweden. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's the exact same setting as the standalone expansion for Warband called With Fire and Sword, for which I already did a review. So in this mod, you've got the immersive scenery, items, and music, with most of the fighting centered around pikes and muskets. Pretty straightforward overall, but basically, if you don't want to spend money on With Fire and Sword, you can get a pretty close experience with Honor and Glory. There are some main differences, including the lack of a story campaign in the mod, but alternatively, in Honor and Glory you can start as a ruler of any given faction and just go to war, which I do love the option. Honor and Glory is pretty solid and makes for a great mod for anyone who is a fan of this place and time period. My only complaint comes with the battle themselves. The mod emphasized a lot on morale, and troops are very prone to rout if the battle doesn't go well. This isn't much of an issue on its own, except the firing line tends to rotate based on the nearest enemies, so routing enemies could literally cause your firing line to face the wrong way, which is frustrating. But besides that, great mod overall. And finally, in the top 3, it's time we get into some fantasy mods, starting with, at number 3, with Chronicles of Might and Magic. This mod is based on a fairly old series of video games called Heroes of Might and Magic, which I haven't played, so it's likely some of its charm is lost on me. Basically, this is another fairly ambitious fantasy mod that covers both spellcasting and a wide range of non-human species. The mod also had one of the best intros I've ever seen. Basically, as soon as you start the game, you're in a town, and it just gets destroyed as a demon portal opens and overwhelms the city. It was a pretty awesome way to start the game, but then you get through a portal, and after that it's just regular sandbox, I guess. Unless there's a unique storyline somewhere. If there is, I found no indication of it. But anyway, from here the mod is pretty straightforward. Magic is similar to other mods, with magic staffs to throwing magic balls at people. There's also the spellbook mechanic, as seen in Fantasy Calradia, although it's a bit awkward to use. Then there's the fantasy creatures, an absolute ton of them. From zombies to vampires, from fiends and ogres, to floating brains, whatever that is. Seriously, it blows my mind how much effort went into these units, and it just makes battles all the more epic. Then there's the dragons, which, not gonna lie, it's probably the most impressive attempt I've ever seen on Warband. This is basically what happens when you couldn't care less about the game's engine's limitations. Careful not to get a headache though. After that, the main gameplay addition I've noticed is the sheer amount of dungeons on the map, each garrisoned with lots of strong units. They are a one-time exploration, so once you clear a dungeon it just disappears, but many of them offer unique items, which is pretty cool, and they'll keep you busy for a while. Overall, the mod was pretty solid, immersive, and stable, but also simple. I couldn't see a lot of change to the core game, but still, if you enjoy fantasy mods, this one is definitely worth a shot. If you want to take it to a whole other level though, number 2 is a must try. This is Blood and Steel. Blood and Steel takes us to Calradia with 3 main changes. Firstly, there's a bunch of fantasy elements, from undead knights to golems to remnants, whatever those are. Basically, there's a bunch of non-human species. Secondly, the game centers around a class system which you establish when starting the game. I of course went with a revolutionary peasant, and basically what this did is make me an ally with every faction, but also had good relations with all the villages, allowing for easy recruiting. And finally, the game just upped the battle size to 11. Each leadership perk point increases party size limit by 50. Each bandit group ranges from 50 to 400. Caravans also have 600 units in them, as do lords. Proportionally, recruiting is also made very easy, as each group often offer anywhere from 50 to 100 units, each tavern often offering 3 different mercenary groups at once. All in all, this means Blood and Steel is ridiculously epic. I also love the new battlefields. They are so immersive. Add to that grenades and guns, and you get yourself some pretty sick battles. However, this is worth pointing out, the mod is virtually impossible without cheating. Units are both expensive to recruit and expensive to upgrade, but bandit groups themselves barely yield any money. Even some things are just rigged to bankrupt you, like food. In markets, food can cost up to 4 times as much as they do in native, but some of these foods have even less units in them. Basically, feeding your army is almost impossible, so to reach the epic level of battles quickly, cheating is necessary unless you grind for a very long time. But all in all, if you're looking for a mod to just have senseless, massive battles while easily recruiting endless amounts of cannon fodder, Blood and Steel is one hell of a mod. The main thing I did not have time to experience was something called the Doom, that keeps being warned about as happening on like day 45 or something. But I might just save that for a dedicated video, as this mod has lots of layers to uncover. And finally, this one was a pleasant surprise and my instant favorite from all 15 mods I tried for this video. This is Gensokyo Warfare. This one is based on the Touhou project, a long series of video games dating back to the late 90s. To be clear, until playing this mod, I knew nothing about Touhou. So while the main charm of this mod is lost on me, the fact it still ended up being my favorite should be a testament to the quality of the mod. I also didn't have much expectations. From the looks of it, I anticipated a buggy, incomplete, wacky mess. But damn, I was so wrong. So in this mod, we're in the world of Gensokyo, which has lots of fantasy elements with humans and non-humans alike. Everything has the style of an anime, and although it's a bit silly looking, it actually works very well. I also didn't encounter any bugs. The mod is actually really solid, from the beautiful scenery to the items being very immersive. I did cheat very quickly to see what the mod could offer, and it got overpowered very quickly. From a magic attack that worked like a sniper rifle, to throwing daggers, and a stupidly fast and deadly fan. And not gonna lie, the characters look pretty badass. But the mod also comes with a central story divided in many chapters which, wow, This makes Touhou not only a very well made anime mod, but also a very developed story mod. Playing Touhou turned out to be a very pleasant surprise, and I wish I could say more about it, but making this video was quite tenuous as it was. That said, it is the mod I enjoyed playing the most, and I wouldn't shut down the possibility of making a dedicated video in the future. It's definitely a very solid mod overall, and more than capable of adapting the world it's depicting. And that's about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you found some good mods to try out. All of them are linked down below. Don't forget to subscribe on the way there though, especially since I have a big surprise coming up right before Christmas. So hopefully you'll subscribe, and I'll see you then. On a serious note though, take a look at this. Those are my 12 most viewed videos, and 10 of them cover Warband, and they range from well over 120,000 views to over 26,000. So even on the lower end of 20,000 people who watched my videos, it's still over 5 times as many subs as I have right now. And make no mistake, I'm trying to make a living here, so thanks for helping out. Also in the meantime, I created a separate channel, check it out, and join my Discord server. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.